Right now, I am standing in Córdoba, Argentina, the second largest city in the country of Argentina. Some 2 million people live here in the greater Córdoba metropolitan area, so it is by far the second largest city here in the beautiful country of Argentina. Right now, I'm standing in the Historic Center in Plaza San Martin, named, of course, for the liberator from the Spanish of Argentina, Peru, I think Bolivia too, I forget all of them, but very important figure here in Argentina. So we're here in Plaza San Martin. This plaza was established in 1577, but the city of Córdoba was actually established in 1573. That makes it one of the oldest cities here in Argentina. Now, it was originally established on the northern banks of the first river, the Rio Primero, but after 4 years of near constant Amerindian attacks from the kind of local Andean Amerindian tribes, they felt that the southern bank of the river would be more defensible, and so they moved the city here in 1577. They established this plaza from which the city grew, and the city has been based here ever since. Now, behind me is the Cabildo. Now, that would be the center of government during the Spanish colonial period. That's when the Spanish colonial administrators, they would have been there in that building. And now to my right here, behind me, we have the Metropolitan Cathedral of Córdoba, one of the most important Catholic churches here in Córdoba province. And of course, behind me, we have in the center the flag of Argentina. And to the right of it, we have the flag of the province of Córdoba. And to the left, we have the city flag of Córdoba. Now, we'll kind of walk around the square a little bit. We'll begin heading over towards the river that the city is built on, and then the Legislative Assembly of the province of Córdoba, one of the most important government buildings here in the province. And of course, we have the statue of San Martin. We'll keep moving this way. Try to keep a good pace if we can. Now, Córdoba is the second largest city in Argentina, the second biggest economy, and we'll try to walk quickly if we can. It's a Sunday, so there's not many people, not nearly as many people as there usually would be. Many of the businesses are closed. In Latin America on Sundays, businesses tend to be closed. It is a much more religiously observant part of the Western world as compared to, say, Europe or Northern America, where a lot of businesses are still going to be open on Sundays. But here in Latin America, they tend to be much better, or at least much more strict about keeping things closed on Sunday. Now, it's the end of May. It'll soon be June. And so winter here in the southern hemisphere is only a few weeks away. And so it's becoming pretty chilly. During the day, it will still be around 60, 65, even 70 degrees on a nice day. Right now it's about 65 degrees. That's why I'm just wearing a light jacket. But then at night, it will fall to about 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Now we'll keep going. We can maybe hear the kids screaming there. Like in many historic centers in Latin America, there tends to be a lot of, homeless and beggars, and, the less fortunate will come here to try to get people to buy socks or candies, or they'll just beg. So, we had a less fortunate family over there. They had, their garbage bags full of their clothes and stuff like that. Now, anyway, we'll keep walking here. Now, this city is very famous in Argentina for having a large student body. In fact, the second largest university in the country of Argentina, the National University of Córdoba, is here in the city. It was established in 1610. Which makes it the third oldest university in the Americas. That's older than any university in the United States or Canada. And the only two universities in the Americas that are older There's one university in Bogota, Colombia, and one university in Lima, Peru. And other than these two universities, the University of Córdoba is the oldest university in the Americas. And it actually has, I think, about 100,000, 120,000, 110,000, something like that students, so a lot of students. In fact, it's the second largest university here in Argentina after the University of Buenos Aires. And the university city, here in Latin America, oftentimes the major university campuses will be called university cities. And that campus is actually very close to here. We're here in the Historic Center, and then just to the, well, I suppose south of here, there is what's called Nueva Córdoba, New Córdoba. And right next to New Córdoba, you have a large park. I think it's called Park of the Sacrament, something like that. There's the zoo and other things there. And then just below that, there is the university city. And so if you come here to Córdoba, particularly when the weather is nicer, during the summer or earlier in the fall or the spring, and you go out on a Friday or a Saturday night, you're going to go to New Córdoba and you'll see just hordes and hordes of young students from across Argentina out partying the night away. And then of course during the day, if you go to the parks, you'll see all of the students on a Friday or a Saturday afternoon. They'll be laying in the grass, hanging out, drinking mate. So it's a very student-oriented city. And also, I think that something that I found very interesting coming here to Córdoba. Prior to this, I was in Buenos Aires and Rosario, and then coming here to Córdoba. Córdoba is at an elevation of about 1,400 feet. That's where we are right now. It's about 1,400 feet above sea level, so we're no longer in lowland plains. And we're actually at the base, the foothills of what are called the Sierras Chicas, the kind of little mountains, which are a range of mountains here in central Argentina that are only about, they're very high, only 2,000 meters, only about 6,000 or so feet. So they're kind of similar to, say, the Appalachian Mountains in the eastern United States. And Córdoba is here at the base of them. Now, because Córdoba is kind of in a climate transition from the fertile, humid pampas, and then going to the more arid, desertous part of Argentina, Córdoba did not receive the waves and waves of European immigrants in the late 19th century and early 20th century the way that the provinces of Buenos Aires and Entre Rios and Santa Fe did, or the country of Uruguay did. And so the demography here in Córdoba is different than the demography that you'll see in those fertile lowland pampas grasslands of Argentina. The city has a much more Spanish, kind of classically Hispanic, mestizo, Amerindian feel to it, in the way that you're not going to have in, say, Rosario or Bahia Blanca or Mar del Plata or Buenos Aires, which have a much more Italian, pan-European feel to them. Here, it has a much more kind of dusty, arid, Spanish, Amerindian feel to it. And in fact, Córdoba receives much less rain than Buenos Aires or Rosario. During the winter, in fact, there's almost no rain whatsoever. And we'll walk quickly to get this light. We don't get run over by the car. Drivers in Latin America are very aggressive. It's not like Europe or Northern America where pedestrians have the right of way. Here in Latin America, the cars always have the right of way. But fortunately, we're walking on a pedestrian path. There's a lot of pedestrian paths in the historic centers of Latin American cities, and this one is no exception. During the weekday, from Monday to Saturday, this would be a very bustling commercial area. You can see there's shops all around us. But because it's Sunday, they're completely closed, all gated up, and there's no one here. It's completely abandoned. So it's easy for us to walk down. But anyway, during the winter, there's almost no rain here in Córdoba. So right now, even though you'll see the trees around that are watered during the rainy part of the year, during the dry part of the year, which we're in right now, there will be almost no rain for at least a few months. And so it does have a very kind of dusty and dry feel. But anyway, here in Argentina, the north of Argentina was historically much more populated than the center and the south of the country. That's where the indigenous Amerindian, Andean culture was. And so Córdoba in many ways feels like where the north meets the south here in Argentina, where the European population that entered along the estuary of the Rio de la Plata, who settled in the Pampas, they came here to Córdoba, and then kind of the Amerindian population from the north came south, and they kind of met here in the middle, here in Córdoba. It's kind of interesting. It really is kind of a north meets south, Amerindian meets European feel to it. It's very, very fascinating. Now, if you come to the city and you go to the National University, or you go to maybe a theater or somewhere that is a little bit more of a upper middle class region, it's going to have a very European demography. But then if you walk around the more middle class, working class neighborhoods of the city, it's going to have a much more Amerindian demography. And it's very fascinating. When I was in Buenos Aires and Rosario, there actually were a number of people who did not look so dissimilar to me. But when I'm here at Córdoba, I actually am quite a kind of exotic visual minority. I really do stand out in most parts of Córdoba. And so I actually will have a lot of people kind of coming up to me and trying to engage me in conversation, trying to sell me things, begging, whatever, in a way that I wouldn't experience in other parts of Argentina because I don't stand out visually as much. Now, that's because in Buenos Aires, Rosario, these other parts of Argentina, a lot of the people who came, a lot of those Europeans, many of them were Italians, but they were from northern Italy, places like Lombard. And so the northern Italians, they have a much higher percentage of light hair and light eyes as compared to Spain. For example, the recent Pope, Pope Francis, who was born Jorge Bergoglio, his family was all from the far north of Italy. And so people from the far north of Italy, many of them actually look like me because they were not ever conquered, they didn't ever mix with the Arabs or the Turks, and there were many Germanic tribes that came into the far north of Italy during the Roman period and after the Roman period. But here in Córdoba, because this city was more heavily populated prior to the independence of Argentina, it has a more Spanish demography. And so the people here are going to look much more similar to the people in, or at least the European population, are going to look much more similar to the type of people that you would see in Spain, maybe wandering around Madrid or Andalusia. That's the type of people that you're going to see here in Córdoba. Whereas in Buenos Aires or Rosario or Mar del Plata, you're going to see a lot of people who look like they could be from northern Italy. And so there is quite a noticeable difference in the visual appearance of many people here in Córdoba. Very, very fascinating. I must say, I really have enjoyed my time here. I've walked around quite a bit. I like it quite a bit. It does have a very noticeably different architectural style, cultural oeuvre, you might say, as compared to other parts of Argentina, it really does feel much more classically Hispanic than Argentina. You know, many people, when I travel through Latin America and I talk to other people around Argentina, you know, I say I've been there or I'm going there, or what do you think of Argentina? There's actually kind of a negative perception of Argentina by a lot of Hispanics in Hispanic America. Many will go, oh, you know, the Argentinians, they think that they're special, they think that they're different than us, they're arrogant. And I mean, I can see why people feel this way, because it really is. Buenos Aires, Rosario, these areas around the Pampas, Uruguay, it really is culturally, visually, architecturally distinct from the rest of Latin America, from the rest of Hispanic America. But when you're here in Córdoba, it feels much more kind of stereotypically Hispanic in a lot of ways. In some ways, being here in Córdoba, it feels reminiscent of Mexico or Colombia or Peru or, you know, other more kind of stereotypically Spanish, Amerindian mixed parts of Latin America. Yeah, I mean, and I think that you'll see kind of fewer Argentine flags here. I think it does have a little bit less kind of patriotic. You know, there's a lot less murals of Messi or Evita Peron. You know, I mean, I think that perhaps Argentinians will, who are from Córdoba province, might disagree with me saying that. Perhaps they might even take exception to me saying that. But it does have a feel of, you know, this does feel a little bit different than what I've seen in Argentina. Now we're coming to the end of our video because we've exited the Historic Center, and now here we are at the kind of ugly modernist national or the legislative assembly of the province of Córdoba. And right behind that is the river that Córdoba is built on. So we'll check out the National Assembly, or the Legislative Assembly of the province, excuse me. And then we'll walk over to the river, and that's where we'll conclude things. Now, like many countries in Latin America, like Brazil would be a very good example of this, Córdoba made the decision to put a lot of its important provincial government buildings into these new modern structures that I believe were built in the 80s and the 90s. I personally find them very unattractive. I don't know why they did that, but, you know, ultimately, government is going to do what government does. Although being here, it is nice because you can, when you walk out of the city, you do get kind of a nice vista of the city. Now we're walking over some old train tracks right now. That's because actually right there, you can see it, right there, that is the historic train station of Córdoba. I think it's still a little bit in use. Obviously, trains are no longer used nearly as much as they used to be. But 100 years ago, that would have been a very, very important place. But yeah, there's the train station there, and just beyond it is the bus station. Here in Latin America, many people use buses to get between cities. Unlike, say, the United States, where there's usually only a couple of bus companies to get between cities, and the bus stations will usually be quite small. Here in Latin America, the bus stations are often very large, with many, many, many different companies, with many quite nice buses. I will be going there in a few days, actually, to take my bus to Asunción, Paraguay. God willing, of course. Hopefully nothing goes wrong in between now and then. You never know when you're on the road, so we do the best we can. Now we're just coming to a bridge over the river here, and with the view of the river, that's where we'll conclude things. Yeah, there's a very nice path along the river here. The other river that connects to this, actually, which is on the other side of the Historic Center, is called the Canadian River, kind of funny enough. And there's a lot of nice paths along these rivers, so you can bike or scooter or walk. It's quite pleasant, actually. Córdoba is a pretty safe city, not of course by the standards of Europe or Northern America, but by the standards of Latin America. Córdoba is actually a very safe city. And so it's a really wonderful place to walk around, and you'll see a lot of people picnicking and drinking mate, drinking wine, and it's pretty safe. You're not going to be harassed, for the most part, and that's a really, wonderful thing. Yeah, I don't know if there's much more to say. We're just doing these last few steps here to the river, and that's where we're going to conclude things. I don't know if there's really much more to say about Córdoba. I will say that being in Rosario, which only has a few 100,000 less people in the metropolitan area, I will say that Rosario has much less of a gritty urban feel to it. Córdoba really does feel like a proper city. I mean, you could say that Argentina really only has two proper cities. That is Buenos Aires and Córdoba, because Córdoba really is undeniably a proper, real, pumping city. I mean, it really is. Now, before we get the view of the river, let's quickly take a look back. We can see the vista of the Historic Center here. Really beautiful. And right there is New Córdoba. That's where the buildings are a little bit newer, a little bit taller. And then you can see the trees, that's the park, and beyond that park, that's where the National University is. So that's where 100,000 plus students are. Third oldest university in the Americas. Really amazing stuff. And now, here we finally arrive at the river. Now this river runs out of the Sierras Chicas, the little mountains to the west of here, and it runs out to the city here, and there it is below me. I was actually here walking along this path just yesterday, and the water level was lower than it is today. So I don't know, maybe they opened a dam somewhere. I don't know why the water level is quite noticeably higher than it was yesterday. But a pretty non-insignificant river. And if you come here during the rainy season, the river is going to be much, much grander. So yeah, it's pretty nice. Well, anyway, I think that about covers it. So yeah, we'll turn over here really quickly. And we'll see the other view. You can see the river there as well. But yeah, anyway, from here in beautiful Córdoba, Argentina, if you're ever in the country of Argentina, you have to visit the second city of Argentina. You can't claim to have came to Argentina. You can't say that you understand the Argentinian people, the country of Argentina, if you don't come to the truly what is the only other grand city in Argentina, beautiful Córdoba. All right, until next time, ciao.